What's up, y'all? Welcome into another edition of DNVR Rams Live, presented by our friends at Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Happy Sunday, everybody. Hope you have had a great week. Been kind of off in terms of our schedule just because of the travel for media days, and we had rank week. I got into the top 10 biggest what ifs in CSU history. That published on Wednesday night. If you happen to have missed that, go check it out. Appreciate everybody rocking with us live via the Toyota chat. If you wouldn't mind giving us a thumbs up on YouTube, I certainly would appreciate it. We've got a lot to get into for it being the middle of July. Quite a bit to get into from the content cycle, which I can certainly appreciate. We're going to talk a little bit of Summer League here in a sec. The main focus is going to be on what I would say is probably the biggest storyline to come out of Mountain West Media Days, which was Jay Norvell's comments on his contract. We'll play some clips of him speaking out at the Circa Resort and Casino in Vegas as well. We'll talk about kind of some of the things that we learned from him. I'll talk about offensive play calling. Been a big mystery. I think I finally have the answer on that, so we'll get into all of that later on as the show goes. Just briefly here, kind of setting the scene for it all. It was definitely an odd vibe at the media days this year. Kind of a bittersweet element for a lot of folks within the league. There's a lot of really good people that work for the Mountain West Conference who I'm going to miss getting to interact with on a yearly basis. They really do right by, the media, and they put on great events, and there's just a lot of really good people out there. Circa is awesome. It's not the best time to be out there in terms of the sports calendar or just the actual calendar. Going to Vegas in July was brutal. It wasn't quite as hot as the last couple of years. It can be like 120. It was more like 110. Yay, I guess. But I'm thankful to get the opportunity to be out there. You get to spend some time with coaches around the league, talk to various players. I had a piece on Fowler-Nicolosi come out, and I kind of talked about his experiences at the Manning Passing Academy, his expectations for himself, how he's grown over the years. Go check that out at thednvr.com. Great time to become a diehard if you are not. It is a little bit of a weird mix of media. There's a lot of local guys. There's a lot of bloggers and radio guys. There's some really random ones too that I'd never heard of. Does make kind of a weird dynamic when you've got people trying to ask very intentful questions about the program that they cover. And then some of these like TikTokers who are asking the players and coaches what their spirit animal is and if they've ever seen Superman and stuff like that. And I'm not trying to hate, because I think there's a place for everything in the sports media sphere. I'm not trying to get pretentious or anything like that. It just is it's a weird vibe. It really is. I'm interested to see what happens next year with Pac-12. Are we going to be in Vegas as well? I could see them maybe going to Texas, trying to lean into the Texas State edition, kind of draw some publicity there. LA would make sense. I do wonder if you host media days and the basketball conference tournament in the same place like the Mountain West does. There's a lot to find out. It was predictably a rough travel experience. I don't think I've had a flight go out of Vegas on time since before COVID. It was like 3 hours delayed getting out. Got home around 4 a.m. on Friday. That's why we pushed the show back to this weekend instead of going live Friday morning. I'm always amazed how the airports bring the worst out of people, man. I especially can't stand people that try and cut the line and get off the plane before the people ahead of them. You're not more important. I'll box out like Pierce Hornung to make sure that you can't. I actually did that to a couple that was trying to shoot the gap. It drives me crazy. We're all trying to get off the plane, be a good person. The airport is stressful enough, but that's enough on my travel rants. I know nobody cares about any of that. A great question from Aaron in the Toyota chat. Over under on the number of silver bullets Cody Tucker took down in Vegas. I'll put it at 19. I would take the over. I hung out with him and Alex Taylor and some various members from around the league on Tuesday night when I got out there. They can definitely put them back. I can't hang with those Wyoming boys when it comes to beer drinking. And then those guys went out with Jay Norvell, the Wyoming coach, one of the nights, and I know Cody had a good old time based on how he was feeling Thursday. But those are good dudes. That's one of the things that I enjoy about media days. Is just the camaraderie of it all and getting to interact with some different people. We'll talk more about media days here in just a second. I'll get into what we learned from Commissioner Gloria Nevarez, and then again we will focus on the main takeaway here, which is Jay Norvell and his contract situation going into this year. But before we do, I did want to make sure that we hit on Isaiah Stevens and Nique Clifford, who are just doing their thing in the summer league. Unsurprisingly to anybody that followed them at CSU, those guys were pros with the way that they played and operated at the end of their collegiate careers. It's not surprising at all that, particularly in a setting like summer league where it can be a little disorganized, there's not quite as much structure. Those guys who are so savvy, who are tremendous shot creators, who are tremendous facilitators, and they're actually, those two, Stevens and Clifford, are kind of assuming the primary ball handling responsibilities for the Kings right now. They did have some injuries, which has opened up an opportunity for Zay to get a little bit more run in this summer league run. It's funny, he is still undefeated in summer league. Went undefeated with the Heat last year. They won a summer league title. Now he has an opportunity to go back to back with the Kings, and it's just cool to watch those two shining together, to see them creating for each other. There was a sequence at one point where on back-to-back scores, those guys create and end up distributing to each other for back-to-back scoring possessions. It's tough not to get a little bit emotional, as a CSU guy who was around them and got to see them grow. It's just been fun. Nique has been everything that we thought he would be at the pros, in the pros, I should say. I was going for at the next level. I think teams, when they look back a couple of years from now, are going to feel really dumb for letting him slide out of the top 20. He's NBA ready now. Everything that we knew would be a strength for him, he's demonstrated: the ability to stretch the floor, the ability to be an impactful rebounder, a versatile defender who can switch 1 through 5. And then on the offensive end, somebody who can get to his spots all over the floor. He can create for himself in the mid-range game. He can get to the rim. As we already said, he can stretch the floor. He's really grown as a three-point shooter over the years. But I mean, his handle and just some of the stuff that he's been able to put in his bag these last couple of years is quite remarkable. Averaging 16 points a game in the summer league, about 5 assists, 6 rebounds. So doing his thing, doing exactly what we thought. And not trying to be that guy like that pats himself on the back, but we did receive some blowback when we were going through the pre-draft process. We shared that clip from Fran Fraschilla, who kind of talked about how Nique could be a similar prototype to Tyrese Halliburton, somebody who's not a true point guard, but somebody who can shot create and can handle some of those offensive facilitation abilities. I really hyped that up a lot. Even some CSU fans were like, he's not going to be a point guard. And it's like, no, he's not going to be a starting point guard. But the point is that the versatility he provides is a big asset, because he's going to be able to play the 2, the 3 for you, depending on, who's out there with him. But there are going to be some times where he can run the floor for you. And he's really displayed that nicely. Isaiah coming off of a great game yesterday to lead them to the title game. Devin Carter was the star of the game for the Kings in terms of scoring at like 36 points, a monster performance. But Isaiah, 6 points, 6 rebounds, 7 assists. And I think what he demonstrated from a facilitator and just everything he brings to the table in that aspect of the game, I think that's going to be his biggest selling point for why he could, earn some minutes with the actual Kings this year, not just in Summer League. You can definitely tell how much more structured things are offensively when Nique and Zay are out there for the Kings versus the small stretches when they're not on the floor. Things get discombobulated pretty dang quickly out there, but it's just been a lot of fun to follow those guys. Obviously playing for the title tonight against Charlotte, 8 p.m. Mountain Time. I'll certainly be locked in. I know a lot of you guys will as well. I really hope that we get to see some run with Zay on the main roster this year. Signed a 2-year, 2-way deal with the Kings, so I think he's going to stick around. But I really do think that what those two have shown from a chemistry standpoint is a great selling point. Maybe the Kings, who are I think in a place where they hope to be competitive. I don't think it's a total rebuild. I also don't think they expect to contend, but I think they expect to be in the mix, for like the play-in, something like that. Maybe they just kind of pull a Knicks mentality, and we're going to put some guys together who are high IQ players who have a ton of familiarity, who already have that established chemistry. It's something to think about. I mean, it would be really cool, but I do think that Nique being there only increases the likelihood of Isaiah getting a legitimate chance with the Kings, because obviously those two play so well off of each other. And I mean, that alone is reason to potentially keep him around and give him a shot. Before we get into more stuff from media days, if you missed it yesterday, some news came out from Pete Thamel, CSU football losing defensive line coach. Chuka Ndulue was supposed to be in his second year with the program, had been at New Mexico State before that, played at Oklahoma, spent some time with the Broncos. I know the staff really liked him. It is definitely unfortunate from a timing standpoint. We're less than a month from the start of camp. Now is not when you're wanting to have to make staff moves and fill in holes in that, part of the program, but it is what it is. I've seen a lot of comments from it's the end of the world to it doesn't matter at all. I think in some sense, the fact that you're getting poached by the NFL shows that you have an eye for good talent. Obviously, I think you can look at it from a positive in that regard. And as my friend Aaron Harris pointed out on Twitter back when it happened, at least he's not going to another school where he can potentially take talent with him. Also, maybe opens up the possibility of your new guy being able to add some talent for you either before the season, probably not super likely, but potentially, if things go well, you never know what could happen this December and how those relationships could benefit you down the line. But obviously, just from a continuity standpoint, you already had to replace a ton of pieces on that defensive staff. He was going to be the one constant from this past year. Losing him is a bummer. I don't think it's going to cause a mass exodus or anything like that. I've had people tweet at us and ask, what is this going to mean from a portal standpoint? Is everybody in the D line going to dip? I doubt it. Gabe Jones is somebody who I do think is supposed to be a pretty significant contributor this year at defensive end. He was recruited primarily by Chuka. I coached him at New Mexico State, then brought him over to CSU. He's probably feeling extra annoyed at the moment, just given that, Chuka brought him to Las Cruces, then he left, and then he brings him to Fort Collins, and now he leaves again. But that's just kind of how the business goes. I mean, it is what it is. No reason to cry over spilled milk or anything like that. But we'll see. We'll see what they do in terms of filling that role, how quickly they're able to get it done. I would imagine they try and lean on Tyson Summers connects, and you try and get somebody who he's well established with. They already brought some guys over from that Western Kentucky defense. Maybe you bring somebody else over to coach the D line now, just to ensure that you're able to, hit the ground running, and I guess just experience as little bit of disruption as possible here. But definitely a bummer. Definitely a bummer to lose a position coach at this stage of the season. Would have much preferred for this to happen before the spring, certainly. But even, if this had happened late May, you would have had a lot more time to assess the situation, interview multiple candidates, all that. Now you're going to kind of be in a sprint to figure that out. So we shall see. I thought, Chuka Ndulue was a good dude. Enjoyed my few conversations I had with him. Admittedly, didn't talk to him a ton over the last year, but interviewed him a handful of times and certainly heard a lot of good things about him from players and the rest of the staff. So wish him well. We'll see how that works out, and we will see what that ultimately means for CSU football. We're going to get into what we really learned from media days. We're going to talk about that Jay Norvell contract, what we learned from Commissioner Gloria Nevarez. Let's take a quick break real quick. Let's shout out a couple of our partners, and then we will keep the party rolling here. If you're looking for banking that plays at your pace, whether you're tailgating, grabbing halftime snacks, or catching the game from the couch, First Bank is in your corner. With their secure, easy-to-use mobile banking app, you can check your balance, split the tab for stadium nachos, and stay on top of your money anytime, anywhere. It's like having a financial MVP in your pocket. Here's a play that pays. You can earn $300 when you open a new First Bank checking account. Use it to score tickets for CSU, for the Avalanche, for the Rockies, you name it. Whatever keeps your game going strong. First Bank makes managing your money feel like a win. No games, just solid tools to help you stay in control right from your phone. If you're ready to take your banking to the next level, head to efirstbank.com/bonus. That's efirstbank.com/bonus. Certain restrictions and requirements to apply. Member FDIC. I also want to talk to you guys about Mando. Mando is a men's deodorant brand that's hyper-focused on keeping every aspect of a man's body smelling fresh and clean. They mean every aspect. This isn't your standard, traditional underarm deodorant. It can be, but this is deodorant for your whole body. Put it on all your stench zones. We're talking your balls, your butt, your grundle. Their scents are geared towards men. They've got great scents like Bourbon Leather, Cloverwoods, Mount Fuji, and Pro Sport. Every day I wake up and say, I wish my grundle could smell like bourbon leather. Smelly season, don't ruin everyone else's vibes with your smelly self. This stuff actually works. I'm a big sweater. I don't want to ruin everybody's vibes, so I deodorant up. It was created by a doctor who saw firsthand how normal BO was being misdiagnosed, mistreated. Mando Starters Pack is a great way for new customers to check it out. Comes with solid stick deodorant, cream tube deodorant, plus free products of your choice like mini body wash or deodorant wipes. You're going to get free shipping as well. As a special offer for our listeners, new customers get $5 off a starter pack with that exclusive code that equates to over 40% off your starter pack. Use that code DNVR at shopmando.com. That's shopmando.com. Please support our show. Tell them we sent you. Smell fresher, stay drier, boost your confidence from head to toe with Mando. Hope everybody had their shot glasses ready for that. All right, let's keep it rolling here. Let's get back into media days. Again, shout out to Isaiah and Nique. We'll certainly be pulling for them tonight. But we've got a lot to get into here in terms of takeaways from media days and this contract situation. Just briefly, going to fly through the main things that we learned from Gloria Nevarez, the Mountain West commissioner, who I'm a big fan of, by the way. I think from a PR standpoint or from a public appearances standpoint, I think she inspires more confidence maybe than Teresa Gold. That's not to say that Teresa Gold is doing a bad job or is going to be a poor commissioner or anything like that, but I do think that Gloria has a certain, I don't know, swagger to her. I mean, she got described as a pit bull. I saw in the athletic piece from Chris Vanini, one of the departing schools apparently referenced her as that. I would agree. I think she's done a good job in a tough spot. But she did give us a couple of pieces of information that we had been wondering. First of all, the Mountain West seemingly is going to stand pat. They are done when it comes to expansion, at least between now and 2026. So, that means somebody like St. Mary's probably not on the table, New Mexico State, a couple of those other programs that you've seen, rumored to them. They are going to stand pat with Hawaii as a full member, Northern Illinois football, UTEP as a full member, and then they add UC Davis for Olympic sports minus football. Again, their options were limited, much like, the Pac-12 at the moment, and why, you add a team like Texas State, there's not a ton of great options given the spot that they're in. I will say, and this is not from Gloria directly, but just one thing that I heard from multiple people from within the Mountain West Conference is, had there been a full reverse merger between Oregon State and Washington State and the current Mountain West, the projected media rights deal would have been about $12 million per school, which is a really good deal. I don't know if they're going to get that, if either side's going to get that. I also don't know, how accurate that is. It's take it with a grain of salt. The people that told it to me, I'd certainly trust them. But that's interesting, and I guess I will be curious to see what that means for where the Mountain West and the Pac-12 ultimately do come out with these media numbers. I've kind of set the goal for the Pac-12 at around that $10 million per member. I think if you get that, unequivocally a success, even, if it's 8, 9, you're still more than doubling your money, which, that's great. You've just got some fees that you're likely going to have to cover here, and it would just be nice to have a little bit more leg room to work with. The league supports straight seating for the college football playoff. They oppose conferences getting multiple AQs. That's a big thing being pushed by the SEC and the Big Ten at the moment. It would be bad for the Pac-12. It would be bad for the Mountain West. It would be bad for the Big 12 and the ACC, frankly. I think if there was ever a time for all of these leagues to come together and view each other realistically where they stand in the landscape, all of these other leagues should be working together to make sure that the playoff doesn't just turn into a Big Ten an SEC Invitational where they're going to be guaranteed half the spots. Like, you're almost certain to have those spots anyways. Just go out and earn it. I hate the thought of them getting too many AQs. It defeats the entire purpose. Everybody needs to have access to compete for a championship. This is what she had to say on the Pac-12 legal battle. We are really confident in our legal position, and we are committed to resolving these things as quickly as possible because I think it's best for everyone, student athletes, schools, leagues, to move on. That's an interesting statement, just given the fact that they weren't able to come to any type of agreement through mediation. It's going to go to court. Who knows how long this is ultimately going to get drug out? I mean, if it actually goes to court, it could be years. It really could. We'll see. I'm so ready for all of this to have some type of resolution. The last significant thing that we learned was that the Mountain West will be covering GCU's costs to join the Mountain West this year. I assume that means both exit fees and potential entrance fees, or maybe they're just not charging them an entrance fee. Not a move that's super popular, with the departing schools. I've talked about it. I'm not going to get into all that again, but to me, this whole thing was pretty unsurprising. GCU needed a league. They're coming to the Mountain West. It makes sense that the Mountain West would be their landing spot. And if you are the members that are sticking around, you don't really care what the departing Pac-12 members think. That said, if it's something you can use to your advantage in court, the Pac-12 is going to do that, as they will continue to do with this entire litigation process. It's not just as simple as, they signed it, so it is what it is. You're bound there. There's a lot that can go into it, and we'll see, I guess, what the court or what the jury ultimately determines with all of this, and is the deal constitutional and all of that. It's significantly above my pay grade, and I'm sure there's far smarter people and better legal experts who could give you the little nuances of that. I want to get into the conversation around Jay Norvell here, so we're going to play a clip of him answering my question about his current contract situation. I just asked, if they had talks yet. I pointed out that he has a bit of an odd deal where after December 2nd, he no longer has a buyout if he wants to leave CSU. If CSU were to terminate him, though, prior to the end of the 2026 season, they would still owe him the remainder of his deal. Interesting situation and an interesting answer from him, and kind of reading between the lines here, it does seem like there's some disconnect between him and admin about, I guess, how successful things have been to this point. Maybe there's some doubt about, whether Jay can take this to the next level or not. I'll give out all of the facts of the situation. I'll try and talk about the potential pros and cons. I lean more to the side of give him a small extension rather than risk things. This really comes down to risk and reward. But again, we'll get into all of this. And the point of this isn't going to be me to rant at you and be like, if you are a skeptic, this is why you're wrong, or you're so smart if you agree with me. I'm just going to try and lay out all of the info, and you can come to your own determination. But here's a clip of Jay Norvell answering my question about his contract situation, as well as what he and admin are, or whether he and admin are on the same page or not. About, loving life in Fort Collins, wanting to be here, wanting to build it up. You're going into year 4. Don't have that extension yet. Have you guys had talks? You got kind of a unique deal, you don't have a buyout after this year. I'm just curious, what are your thoughts on all that?
Well, it is true. I've got a year and a half left on my contract. We're starting year 4. I had conversations with our athletic director and administration about it. It is also true, December 2nd, I do have no buyout from CSU, which means I'm basically a free agent. I can go coach anywhere. And so we do love it at CSU. I've talked to our administration. I do not want that to be a distraction for this team. I've got a motto for this season. It's we over me. And I really believe that in all ways. Coaches, administration, we have to be together, and everybody's individual goals and desires have to be secondary. And so we've poured our heart and soul out into building this program. It's been very difficult. the last 3 years. What we have to do in this era with the transfer portal, it's very difficult when you recruit kids that you absolutely love and you build them up and you give them an opportunity to play college football and they leave your program. That's hard. And we've had a lot do that. And so we're very focused on that. We are not going to allow any kind of distraction during the season. I don't believe that. And so whether it's my contract or anything else, I'm not going to let that be a distraction for this football team. We got a great opportunity, and we're going to pour everything we can into helping this team be the very best it can be.
Do you feel like you and admin are on the same page in terms of your vision and how to execute it?
I don't know. I mean, you would have to ask them that question. I just know this. I've had conversations that I don't want it to be a distraction. I don't want, once the season starts, I'm all ball, and that's the way my focus is going to be. And so, I mean, you would have to ask them that question. But I'm very comfortable about our staff, what we've accomplished, and the type of quality people we have on our coaching staff and on our team. And that's about all I'm going to say about it.
All right, so a lot of layers to this, obviously. I want to start, Aaron asks in the Toyota chat a little bit earlier, Jay didn't mention John Weber by name. Think there's anything to that? I don't want to be over dramatic or try and create narratives that aren't necessarily there. One thing that I can say fairly confidently is that Jay was certainly tighter with Joe Parker than he is with the current administration based on everything that I've gathered behind the scenes. And, you know, I've also talked about just the simple matter of the fact that Jay not getting the extension after an 8-win season, you know, your first bowl appearance in 8 years, first time you beat multiple rivals in a decade. The fact that he didn't get that extension after kind of a disastrous Arizona bowl, it was something that stood out to me. And I felt like back when John introduced Ali Faroukmanesh during his presser, he made a comment about, you know, when you get to these big opportunities on a national level, it's not just about getting there and you know, oh, we made it. It's about seizing the moment and really capitalizing. And to me, like, that was pretty poignant, kind of reading between the lines of, you know, we want the football program to live up to the moment the way the basketball program has of late. I do think basketball success has put more pressure on Jay, and there's some cruel irony to that from Jay's standpoint, just in the sense that he left Nevada specifically because, one, CSU is a better school with better resources. I mean, they were certainly going to give him a pay raise and all that, but part of it was he was at a school where basketball got all the shine and football was kind of living in the spotlight. He wanted to be at a school where it was all about football. And, you know, traditionally CSU more of a football minded institution. Football is always going to pay the bills, but the rise of the basketball program and everything that they've been able to do, I have talked about it, putting some pressure on football, needing to live up to those standards as well. CSU as an institution has committed significantly to athletics in the last 10 to 15 years from a facility standpoint. From a resources standpoint, you know, just day to day, the coaching staff, you know, all the tools and nutrition and everything that like comes along with that recruiting. Like there's a lot of elements that go into being a successful football program. And certainly when you look at how CSU has committed to the program going into this year in particular by, you know, significantly increasing the assistant pool, giving Jay an opportunity to have a deeper staff and a deeper, you know, personnel group and a deeper recruiting staff, like all of that, you know, does add up, and it does put more pressure on you to succeed because you can't turn around and say, well, you know, we didn't have the right resources at our disposal to, you know, do this. Like CSU, they've put the money now. They put the money down. Now it's time to get the results. And I do think that had things played out differently in the Arizona Bowl, I think it would have made a lot of this a little less complicated. It's not just as simple as had they won that game, you extend them because they didn't, you don't. But I do think that, along with some other games, kind of play a factor in all this, despite the fact that CSU has improved in every season that Jay's been here. You go from 3 wins to 5 wins to 8 wins. He has checked some boxes and accomplished some things that are historically rare But the trouble is there are about 4 or 5 key games you can point to over the last 2 seasons specifically that, despite the fact that there is an upward trajectory and you have seen that success, I do think there's a lot of people waiting for the other shoe to fall and wondering, is there really another level from here? So we're going to keep this going. Again, I'll lay it all out. We'll get into some of the pros and cons. We'll talk about the facts. I'll try and just lay it out so you can come to your own opinion on things. But we do need to shout out a couple of our other partners real quick, and then we'll keep this going. Cake Mortgage is the business owner's home mortgage partner. They specialize in non-QM loans. If you're a regular employee of a company, you get a W-2, your income shows on your tax return. That makes it really easy when you go to try and get a home loan, when you try and refinance, things like that. Lenders love this because it's nice and simple. They don't want things to be complicated. It is complicated, unfortunately, for business owners. By maximizing legitimate business deductions and expenses, business owners can reduce their taxable income and keep more money in the business. This means their tax return shows little income. Most lenders don't understand this type of complex loan, so they're going to just deny people because they don't understand what they're looking at. With Cake, they can help you get approved by validating your cash flow through bank statements, through certified profit and loss statements, or business tax returns. This is good for contractors, for creative professionals, tech entrepreneurs, business founders, anyone who kills their own meat, it says. Head to the link in the description to get started. Cake Mortgage Corporation, equal housing lender, NMLS number 1734623. Licensed in Colorado by the Division of Real Estate. Terms and conditions do apply. I also want to talk to you about the official vehicle of DNVR. That, of course, is Toyota. For generations, trucks have always been a part of Toyota's DNA. They build durable legends destined for greatness and perfect for this wonderful state. Whether you're off-roading, whether you're driving around the city, they've got a vehicle that's perfect for you. Check out the Tacoma. Check out the Land Cruiser. They've got 17 models with all-wheel drive or four-wheel drive, like the Epic 4Runner. They also have more low and zero-emission vehicles combined than any other automaker to give customers numerous choices to reduce their carbon footprint. 16 hybrid vehicles to choose from, like the Tundra iForce Max hybrid truck. Toyota SUVs take command on the road and on the trail, so you can explore the road less traveled without sacrificing smooth city rides and SUVs like the RAV4 and Grand Highlander. Toyota is a proud partner of CSU Athletics and the official vehicle of DNVR. Toyota, let's go places. All right. In the Toyota chat, it says, Jay winning a Mountain West Conference championship this year and then leaving would be the most CSU thing ever. Still way too risky for an extension heading into the Pac-12. The thing is I think there's risk associated no matter how you play it out. I mean, if you extend him, it doesn't guarantee that he's going to stick around. There's a scenario in which you give him a contract extension this year if CSU were to really hit their stride, and we'll play out your scenario and say they won the Mountain West Championship. It's still possible that, like in Iowa or whatever, came and plucked him away. But if you're CSU, if he were to leave for another school, you would prefer to get a buyout out of the situation. I mean, that really helps with the hiring process of bringing in the next guy. You did save some money, given the basketball situation, like going from Nico to Ali. So you do probably have some money to work with. But like there is an element of this where, giving him a 1 or 2 year extension and then, adding in, some different buyout terms for these next couple of years would give you a little bit more protection as a program. The counter to that, obviously, is that you could end up in a Bobo scenario where you have seen some flaws and the admin leans into optimism and they are betting on, things kind of turning for the better, like start some of those close games that had not been going your way. You're banking on them to, go your way in the future. And obviously with Bobo, it just did not end up being a good situation. It didn't end up being as disastrous as it could have been, given the fact that he took a discount because I think him and Parker got along well, and he lined up that South Carolina job, and he could have really held us over the rakes there and really, demanded he get his full deal, sat out from coaching for a year. He wasn't going to do that. Bobo is a good dude, despite some of the the struggles that they had, I always really enjoyed getting to be around him. And I think he was far more unlucky than he was like a genuinely bad coach, if that makes sense. I think he's a brilliant offensive mind. The defenses really struggle. That's been a factor in Jay's term as well. The disconnect between offense and defense, and not being able to be successful on both sides of the ball at the same time. It's felt like when the offense has been rolling, the defense has struggled. When the defense has been rolling, the offense struggles to put up points. And I think a lot of fans are just kind of hoping that they can finally get it going on both sides of the ball here, and that would be huge for CSU's chances of contending. But again, kind of laying out the facts of the situation here. Going into year 4 of an initial 5-year contract, after December 2nd, Jay can walk without a buyout, though if he were to be terminated, CSU, if they were to fire him in season, I believe they would owe him $2 million for next year plus 1.5 on top of that, so about $3.5 million. If I'm interpreting this correctly, if he were to be fired in 2026, it would just be the remainder of his contract, which would be about $2 million. He's going to make $1.9 million this year, $2 million next season. That's one of the higher contracts in the league, so there's some pressure that comes with that. It's also a contract you can afford if you are CSU. He's 16 and 21 over the last 3 years, but has improved with multiple wins each year, going from 3 to 5 to 8. But one of the things that I've talked a lot about, and I keep going back to my post-game show after the Arizona Bowl, and I really do feel like my temperature check, or, my assessment of the situation was pretty spot on, in that this was going to make things really complicated. And I think that a lot of goodwill, unfortunately, with the majority of the fan base kind of went out the window at that point, with CSU first failing to even reach the conference championship game. Everything's lined up there for you to do it. Going into Fresno was tough, but it was certainly a winnable game. That's not the Fresno of the last couple of years or anything like that, or, Derek Carr and Devontae Adams out there. It was a winnable game, and you dug yourself a deep hole, and they ended up putting up some decent stats at the end and made it look closer than it really was. But that's kind of strike 2. Strike 1 was the way that CSU just completely did not even show up in the non-conference slate, to be honest. Like, UTEP and Northern Colorado were really underwhelming wins. You don't do anything against Texas. I mean, that was just a disaster. Basically punted on the game, and then even CU, first showdown in Fort Collins since 1996, and to play as poorly as they did in that game, it had a lot of people feeling uneasy. And then, you did get some positive momentum rolling, and I really do feel like CSU won multiple games within the league slate that very easily would have gone the other way over the last decade. I think San Jose State, New Mexico, Air Force, at best, you win one of those games the last couple of years, and you're not a bowl team. So, I mean, there was improvement this past year, and even from the sense of you won 8 games, you made a bowl game, you beat 2 Front Range rivals for the first time since 2015. You beat Air Force in the Springs for the first time since 2002, and that's coming off of the 2023 season where you beat Boise State for the first time in program history, albeit through an objectively kind of fluky comeback, but a win's a win. I mean, Boise had just as fluky of a comeback in 2017, and then they're not going to add that context when they're talking about the series history. So neither am I. A win is a win, and that is one of the things where I think I defer from the majority of the fan base, or at least the skeptical portion of the fan base who keeps trying to poke holes in CSU's success from this past season. And I understand some of the logic of it. You're trying to not get your hopes up too much because you feel like they took advantage of an advantageous schedule. And there is some truth to that. Like, you had 7 home games, which you are going to have again. You got to avoid Boise and UNLV in the regular season. That was a benefit. Wyoming and Air Force were not as strong as they had been in the couple of seasons leading up to that. But where I get particularly annoyed with that one especially is that Wyoming and Air Force over the last 20 years have beat a ton of mediocre at best CSU teams, and you're not going to hear Wyoming or Air Force or CU or any of those people ever add the context of, well, they weren't that good, so it didn't win. No, you won a trophy game. You're going to celebrate it. I don't know why we are being such Eeyores about all of it. it is one thing that I think if you're Norvell, you can be rightfully frustrated is look at what we have done in the past year compared to where the program was at before I came in. He certainly inherited a disaster. But even, in the half decade leading up to that, like this is not a program that has a ton of proud history. There's not a lot of teams that have won 8 games in this program's history. So whether the schedule is advantageous or not, I don't care. I'm going to take it because there've been plenty of opportunities where CSU had just as approachable of a schedule with a lot of very beatable opponents, and they finished like 4-8. So finishing 8-4 in the regular season, I'll take that 10 times out of 10. He has absolutely stabilized the program. It's been hard, I think, from a continuity standpoint or a lack of continuity standpoint, just because of the portal. I will say every program in the country is dealing with this, so it's not unique to CSU. There are plenty of other teams who lose multiple starters every year, and they're able to figure it out. But I do think that it's not fair to act as if that is not a factor in all of this. When you look back historically, programs are able to develop and continue their ascension because of that continuity. You have guys for 2-3 years. You have some growing pains early on in the process, but then by the time they're a sophomore, they're a little bit better, and then junior and senior year, you're really hoping to reap the rewards of that. And there's just less of it in college football today. Now, that's not to say that you can't build a competitive roster through the transfer portal, because you can, but it's just challenging when you're doing it from a year-to-year basis. It's challenging when you don't have continuity, between your quarterback and your receivers. You've lost 6 starting receivers these last couple of years to the portal. Like, that is a significant factor on top of Torrey Horton not being as healthy as you would have hoped over the last 2 years. What they had envisioned for this offense versus what it ultimately ended up being are 2 completely different scenarios. And the portal is a factor in that. And it would be ignorant to say that it's not. But again, this is nothing unique to CSU. Every program is dealing with it at some point. You just have to find a way to break through, point blank, period. And I'm hoping this year that's the case. I'm really optimistic. We're going to talk about the offense here in a couple of minutes, what that might look like. I think there's an opportunity to really open up things offensively. You've got a lot of talent at the skill positions. I'm intrigued by the versatility that they should be able to have. But I think the biggest reason why fans are still struggling to buy into Norvell, or at least why some are, is the inability to capitalize in the big moments. And when you look at the Arizona Bowl and you've got thousands of CSU fans, who traveled and made the effort to be there, like those are the moments you've got to capitalize. Those are the moments you've got to win. And unfortunately, I think there's been about 5 of them these last couple of years, give or take a few, depending on, if you really want to place some of these in the category or not. But I think there's a small handful of games that if they just go the other way, this conversation is much simpler than it currently is at the moment. And there's a lot more people that are bought in. But when you lose the bowl game, when you lose both Rocky Mountain Showdowns, especially 2023, when the game was there, you had it, you were the better team for 55 minutes that night, and you just let it slip away. You find a way to blow it. When you find a way to lose to UNLV, when you're up, twice in the final 5 minutes, when you get walked off by Hawaii after, giving yourself an opportunity to hopefully go to overtime and then, play your way into a bowl game. Like, those moments have unfortunately added up these last couple of years. And that's why I've talked a lot about how key September is, because I think the Rams need to earn some style points if they are going to get the fan base collectively to really buy into what's being built right now. And if they're going to get the admin to, buy into what's being built right now, it's not just the fans. There's very clearly some skepticism from the top down at the moment too. And it's going to be really, really interesting to see how this all plays out. And I'll get into some pros and cons of extending him. Then we'll wrap it up, and then we'll talk about some other things we learned about CSU, offensive play caller, that kind of stuff. But let's take our last break. Let's shout out a couple of our partners. Let me catch my breath. We'll play another clip of Norvell, and then we'll get into the rest of the show here. Finances can be messy and confusing. Monarch Money acts like your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control so you can stop earning and start growing. It's more than your average budgeting app. Monarch Money is a complete financial command center for your accounts, investments, and goals. Don't just manage your money, start building wealth with 50% off your first year for our listeners. I think tracking your spending is important because it's just easy to get carried away quickly, particularly when you're swiping a card. I mean, it just boom, boom. Oh, I just spent $75 like that. Start managing your finances to build the life you actually want. Monarch makes managing your money simple, even for busy lives. It's the finance tool people actually love, named the Wall Street Journal's best budgeting app of 2025. Get control of your overall finances with Monarch Money. Use that code DNVR at monarchmoney.com in your browser for half off your first year. That's 50% off your first year at monarchmoney.com with the code DNVR. Finally, got to shout out the homies at Game Time. Game Time offers exclusive zone deals for the FIFA World Cup next summer. You can get 10% off with the exclusive zone deals that they offer for World Cup matchups. Game Time, though, especially because most of you probably aren't going to the World Cup, it's great for sports fans because it's the best place to get the best deals at the last minute. Especially in the summer, like you might just randomly want to go to a Rockies game. You might randomly want to go to a Pids game or something like that. With the Game Time Picks curation function, it makes it easier than ever to save money on sports, concerts, comedy, theater, etc. Their all-in pricing shows you the price you're going to pay at the beginning. You're not going to get hit with a bunch of surprise fees. I absolutely hate that, so I love that about Game Time, that they don't make you deal with that nonsense. They've got the lowest price guarantee. Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference, and your purchase is covered with the most flexible customer service policy in the ticketing industry. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time Picks. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use that code DNVR for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account, redeem that code DNVR for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? Game time. All right. Ramhill says, manifesting a signature win on the road at Washington and extension right after. That would be awesome. That would be awesome. I think there's a lot of potential pros to extending him right now. Personally, I just think that it sends the right message, that you reward the right trajectory. I know that can get tricky. We've lived that with Bobo, but I do think there is some validity to the argument that if you were to just let Jay walk, particularly, like, let's say they won 8-9 games again, you don't lock him down, he ends up walking, goes somewhere else. Does that scream we have realistic standards to a potential pool of quality candidates, or does that more imply, we think we need to be something right away that's not necessarily realistic? I mean, I just think that's something you do have to consider. Like, if you are one of those schools where it's considered unrealistic, I think a lot of smart coaches avoid that, especially when, you're not in the SEC. It's not like you're taking the Auburn gig or something like that, which I think from an expectation standard is one of the worst gigs in the country. They expect you to be Bama, they expect you to be Georgia, and you just aren't. But if you gave him a minor extension, I'm not saying give him another 5 years, but give him another year or two on the deal with give yourself some protection potentially if you were to do it in terms of him leaving, get a buyout in there. You don't have to, go crazy. I don't think you give him a massive raise or anything like that, at least at this point. Now, if they win the league or something like that, then I think the conversation changes. But I think the potential of the grass not being greener is very much in play right now, particularly when you look at the majority of the history of this program. Sonny is the outlier, guys. And I know Jim McElwain gave us a little bit of a taste of that excitement, but even him, like, he wasn't around long enough to know if he truly would have sustained it or not. One of the biggest what ifs in program history. Again, go check that out if you missed that show from earlier this week. But I think from a roster retention standpoint, there's a lot of risk of the roster basically completely exiting if you lose a coach like this and then you're starting at ground zero again. I hate that, especially in the trenches. Like, it just takes time to establish some continuity there and to get the type of bodies you need. I mean, Jay, one of the things he mentioned, and this is true, like, you can roll your eyes, but he made a comment about how all the offensive linemen were 5 inches shorter than him when he came in. That's true, man. That was a tiny, tiny room. I was looking down at some of those guys. They're obviously wider than me, but I mean, I'm like 6'1.5", almost 6'1". If I'm going to be one of the taller guys in that room, that's not a great spot. I think they've done a really good job of rebuilding in the O-line room. And I think that's an area that's going to be really solid for them, going forward. I think, receivers, tight ends, they've got talent there. I just think there's a lot of risk if you potentially start over. I think if you give them an extension, it keeps everybody happy and on the same page. Coaches don't like being in lame, contract lame situations, a lame duck here. That makes sense. It's an uneasy feeling. Everybody wants to have that feeling of stability, like they're valued. But there are cons, and that's that we're in Mike Bobo 2.0 scenario where, you've already peaked and it's only going to get worse from here. If you do extend him, it just, potentially makes it more expensive to move on from him down the line, a bigger buyout, something like that. If the end is inevitable, it ends up being wasted time. You're better off just moving on and, starting anew. But the problem is that's all hindsight type stuff. There's no way of knowing that right now. It all comes down to risk versus reward and what the admin is comfortable with. Is the grass greener? We shall see, I guess, if they don't extend him. But it really is a weird dynamic. And I don't think there are a lot of programs around the country that would be in this specific spot after the team's first, winning season in 8 years and first bowl appearance since 2017 and all that. So again, I think it's clear. I lean more onto it makes sense to extend him. I do believe in what Norvell is building. I also understand why there's a lot of fans that are skeptical at this point, because again, you look at those big moment games the last couple of years, they haven't gone CSU's way, and that needs to be the biggest difference this year. You've got to win some of these key games in September, and then in the league slate as well, you're going to have a couple of opportunities, Boise, UNLV, Air Force, and Wyoming, go 3-1 in those games, beat a Washington State at home, compete with Washington, at least on the road, beat them. That'd be incredible, but certainly show a hell of a lot more than you have against Texas and Michigan these last couple of years. Can you give me a 2017 Bama situation where you hang and you at least are competitive? 2013 Bama as well. I'd be stoked with that. But if they come out there in September and they just get rolled again right off the bat and they lose some of these games at home, UTSA, Washington State, I think this conversation potentially gets really, really tricky, especially given that it's very clear the admin has already, by their actions, they're not publicly being critical of Jay, but by their actions and not giving him the contract extension have shown that they feel skepticism right now. And I really think the first 6 weeks are going to be huge. And I mean, shoot, things could get pretty weird at the end when you end with a road trip to Boise State and Air Force against home. That's not a great position to be in. And I'm sure Jay's thinking about that too. I'd sure love to have an extension lockdown before we have to play that brutal stretch to end the regular season. If you go out, 0-2 in those games and really lay an egg, it probably opens up for some pretty uncomfortable conversations. We're going to play one more clip here of Jay Norvell and kind of what he learned, or not what he learned, what we learned from Jay Norvell and kind of his thoughts on the portal windows and personnel and all that. But I did want to just rapid fire a couple of things that I learned from conversations both on and off the record. One of the things that I have seemingly found out is what will happen with the play calling this fall. Going back to the spring, I reported that Mummy was going to be elevated, that Chase Holbrook was going to go to quarterback coach. They ultimately announced Mummy as passing game coordinator. They announced that promotion of Holbrook to quarterback coach. But then Jay was kind of really weird when we asked him in spring what that ultimately was going to mean in the fall. Was pretty coy. I went on the Ram Nation show with Joel, and they had BFN on, and even he was kind of like, I don't really know what I'm allowed to tell you. So to me, it seemed like it was still kind of in flux, but everything that I had heard behind the scenes was that Mummy was going to have an increased role as a play caller. Mummy did call the plays throughout the spring. Norvell took more of an intentful approach to be around the defense as they changed schemes, but it does sound like Jay Norvell will be calling plays this fall based on what I was able to gather out at media days. I don't know what changed. I know that it's definitely a pride thing in there to an extent, just based on how Norvell handed the play calling responsibilities at Nevada. And then these last couple of years, how things have shaken out. I do think he, especially given that he doesn't have the contract extension, would rather, if he were to go down go down while he at least has his hands on the wheel and is in firm control of the offense. If you're calling the plays, you can control the pace better and tempo better. I also think it just makes it harder to manage the entire game. I think there would have been some big advantages to, Jay delegating that role to somebody like Mummy, or if you don't trust Mummy, then somebody else down the line. But again, I told you guys that I would update you as soon as I could, and that all I can do is give you the information while I have it. There's been some quirkiness to this whole process, but it does sound like it will be Jay and not Matt Mummy, as I originally reported a couple months ago. So I just wanted to make sure that info is out there and accurate. I'll tweet it at some point, but I wanted to get the info to people who actually tune into the content, who read my stories and watch the show. If all you do is follow me on Twitter, then you get what you get. Just kind of looking at the numbers here, CSU averaged about 389 yards a game. It wasn't as big of a drop-off as you would have assumed, about 11 yards a game, only about 30 yards a game in terms of difference in passing production, 220 this past year, 250 the year before. That said, those numbers were kind of skewed by the end because CSU finished with 3 straight games, 300 plus passing yards to end the season last year. They didn't have any before that. There were 8 that were sub 250 and 5 sub 200. So, I think we all know the passing offense wasn't what we envisioned. There were 11 games with 100 plus rush yards, though, and 7 games with 170 or more rush yards. Can you find some middle ground, man? Like 2023, you have 6 games with 300 plus passing yards, but you have 5 multi-interception games and essentially no run game whatsoever until the second half of the year. Your leading game in terms of rushing production from 2023 would have been like the 4th or 5th most that you had all of last season. So I like where you're at with the backfield. I like the talent you have at the receiver and the tight end positions. You've got a veteran 3rd-year starting quarterback. Can you open up that offense and find the best of both worlds? They're going to have to if they are going to be a legit contender. But let's play one more clip of Jay Norvell kind of talking about the transfer portal windows and then an investment in the personnel staff and the benefit that CSU has seen from that.
So just to kind of clarify for everybody, and I'm the AFC representative for the Mountain West, and so I meet with Craig Bowl on these national issues. There is so many issues in college football that we have to address, and you have this house deal that's just got passed. We're trying to get one portal. We're as college football, we became a 2-semester sport last year. We start in August, and we didn't have the national championship to almost February last year. So it's very difficult in 2 semesters to have people transfer and still be on the same team. That we have agents. We have this whole thing with transparency. We have these new rev share rules where everybody's supposed to know what everybody makes, okay? But also you still have collectives and you still have people that are making money that are still giving money to athletes. So there are people that are going to be over 20.5 million. And so how does that equate? So we've got to make it transparent. We got to see what people are doing at other schools to really have an opportunity. And, there are some things that have improved because of the House settlement. It will be interesting to see how transparent things become. But from our perspective, we have got to keep fighting to be relevant and to play with the top schools in the country. And a lot of that has to do with your finances and how you can keep pace financially.
You guys have brought in quite a few new players. Obviously lost some guys to the portal in December, brought a lot in before the spring, brought in a lot after. You guys invested a lot in terms of your personnel staff over the winter. Has that been a relief for you of having more resources at your disposal?
Yes, and I think it's given us an opportunity to have a chance. Yeah. To be honest with you, if you recruit and don't replace, your roster goes like this every year. And that's where we were going. until we got some more revenue. And now you may lose some players, but you got a chance to replace the experience. And that's what we were able to do this year. I think us and Washington State were the only two teams that actually that actually gained playing experience and reps from the players that they brought into the portal. And so, and that was intentional. We lost a lot of experienced players, the Jack Howells, the Henry Blackburns, but we also brought in guys that were starters at other schools that had that same type of experience. Now they're going to use that at Colorado State. So it gives you a fighting chance, and we still need to retain our best players. When we bring a guy in like a Caleb Goody, it's hard to replace that speed. And everybody knows it. I mean, it doesn't take, Einstein to figure out that guy's really fast and he can run. And so he's valuable to other programs. And, they came in and gave him $740,000 to go to Cincinnati. And so we still have to be able to retain those type of players to really have elite talent in our program.
Coach. All right. Again, I know the more cynical crowd will say, oh man, why are you always complaining about this? But that's something that I've harped on quite a bit over the years is you need more transparency. You need better structure. And one transfer window would be huge for a roster building purpose and just being able to have a better idea year to year who's actually going to be on your roster, much closer to an NFL free agency, which is essentially where we are heading anyways. Caleb Goody getting $750,000 is crazy to me. That dude's a burner, but I mean, he's got a lot of room to grow in terms of being a complete receiver. I've talked about that in the past. Like, yeah, he was a burner, but just from a route running, even a hands standpoint, like he's going to need to be a lot more consistent to live up to that type of paycheck. We're in overtime right now. So if you were watching on TV, you can head to thednvr.com to catch the last couple of minutes of the show here. Keep the questions, comments rolling in the Toyota chat. I'll get to as many as we can. Here we've got a great one. Jay winning Mountain West this year. Still way too risky for an extension heading into the Pac-12. That's fair. I also don't know if you want to go into the Pac-12 with a first or second year coach as well. Could be a little bit of a wonky scenario. Colorado State Raymond says, what do you think the odds of Norvell being extended before the season starts are? Not very high. I mean, I don't, if you hadn't gotten an extension worked out to this point, I don't think, it's going to happen between now and week one. To me, it seems like the admin is more in wait and see mode. I'm hoping to get John Weber on the show at some point. And so, we can ask him a little bit more directly, but me just reading the room, me taking the temperature, that's where I'm at. And that's what I expect is if the extension is going to happen, it's probably going to come at some point in season, assumingly, after some success and potentially a big win or two. Josh wants to know, when does camp start? I really want to see how summer has gone for the Rams. I believe it's going to start August 1st. We don't have an official schedule as of yet, but it should be August 1st, give or take a day or two, right there at the end of the July or the first week of August. Josh also wants to know, will he take more in-game input from both Best and Mummy? I have no idea. This whole offensive play calling scenario has been really weird. If you're not going to be taking some input, then what is the promotion really, other than semantics and just changing title? It potentially did allow you to hang on to somebody like Chase Horlbrook and then drawn a Mike Goff as well, who is essentially the co-offensive line coach with Bill Best at this point. He's a guy who was at San Diego State for a long time, has been on the staff. You promote him with this. So it allows you to elevate some other guys within your staff, and maybe it's as simple as that. Also potentially makes it easier for guys like Bill Best and Matt Mummy to get a promotion, at other programs down the line. One of the things that Nico made Ali Farouk-Manesh do the last couple of years was finally accept that title of associate head coach. Ali's responsibilities didn't change at all. It's just a perception thing, and it makes it easier to hire you as the head guy if you've already had that title. So it could be something like that, like Jay just trying to look after his guys for, future career opportunities. It's tough to say. It's been very odd how all of this has been handled this year. I will say that, and certainly it's been confusing to me because I had people who are very trustworthy. I've had coaches directly on staff tell me that it was going to be Mummy as the play caller. I'm not going to throw anybody's names out there specifically because I don't want to get anybody in trouble or anything like that. But that wasn't like just crap I was throwing at the wall. People very much in the know had told me that. And again, I'm not really 100% sure what had changed, but I think the writing was on the wall when even in spring, Jay wasn't willing to really talk about the situation. I think he wanted to think it all through. And this is ultimately where we have landed. Just before we get out of here, a couple of things. Really surprising there were no Rams on the preseason all-conference team. I don't know if there's anybody that's like a very glaring, I can't believe they didn't make it. Just when you look at some of the picks over them, you can see the logic, but just the fact that none of them made it, considering their pick to finish in the top third of the conference, is a little bit weird to me, especially when you look at the love that like San Jose and Fresno and some of these other teams got. Like I guess I don't see it. John Michael Gillenborg is an absurd omission. I thought he's closer to being preseason offensive player of the year than he would be to not being on the team. I'm not saying he is the preseason offensive player of the year, but I mean, like, I thought he's clear cut the best tight end in the conference coming in. Surprised the Boise kid got it. The running back scenario is a little bit surprising to me. Neither of the Boise backs, they go with Humphrey, the New Mexico back, who was a stud at the FCS level, but's unproven to this point. I would have gone with either of the Boise guys or even, I mean, Justin Marshall averaged over 6 yards a carry. I believe both the Wyoming guys voted for Marshall. I voted for Gillenborg as well. So some CSU Wyoming unity on the ballots there. Predicted order of finish, fairly predictable and how it all played out. San Jose State really benefits from a favorable conference schedule. Boise is clear cut the favorite. And then I really feel like 2 through 6 is pretty open at this point. I'm higher on CSU and Air Force than the field. I'm lower on Fresno and San Jose State, although I do think San Jose State will be a 7-8 win team just because of that schedule. And I think they'll put up some numbers offensively. But I think Evans defensively was probably the biggest surprise to me in terms of not getting some recognition, and maybe kind of a glaring example of some of those voters just looking at Athlon and Phil Steele and calling it good and not really diving into some of the production, or like, oh, I know that name, so I'm just going to give it to him. Trey White being preseason defensive player of the year, no beef with that whatsoever. Dude's a stud, wreaks havoc, but I'm very high on Evans coming into this year. And special teams too. I think the kicker they brought in from Baylor is going to be a stud. All right. If you missed the honorable mention, or I mean, if you missed my my greatest what ifs, I do have some honorable mentions. Or what if Tom Hilbert went to CU? What if CSU beats Air Force in 2014? What if CSU wins the showdown in 04, 05, or 2023? I ended up going with the 96 border war in 2017 Boise game over those because they had direct conference championship implications. What if CSU doesn't get snubbed from the 2015 NCAA tournament? What if Capri came back? What if Miles never left for Nebraska? Just some fun ones. Thank you for the really nice Twitter shout outs. I've gotten some really nice stuff from CSU fans of late. It is a grind to do this year round, but when I'm getting comments like, you've helped me rediscover my passion for CSU and sports, it's very humbling, and it really does mean a lot to me. And I do hope that the CSU fans know how much they really mean to me. It's not something I just tweet to be corny or anything like that. It's genuine. I wouldn't be here without y'all. And the continued support that you guys show for me is genuinely incredible. A shout out to our super producer, Dion, behind the scenes, being flexible, helping us make this happen on a crazy week. He's doing an awesome job, and we love working with him. Thanks for listening to the DNVR Rams podcast presented by Branded Bills. Head to brandedbills.com. Use that code BBDNVR for 15% off of your first order. Much love, y'all. Always proud to be. Peace.
We all silly like the mayor.